Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started because this is going to be a wonderful session, and we want to leave plenty of time to have conversation with not only our wonderful guests, but also for the membership to have an opportunity to ask some questions and engage with our guests. Let me start off with some introductions. Dr. Wayne Maines is the first and foremost proud father of identical twins, one boy, Jonas Maines, and one girl, Nicole Maines. Wayne and his wife, Kelly, have worked extremely hard to raise their children in an environment that was not ready for a new generation of transgender children. Nicole Maines has become a strong woman with a clear and loud voice for safety and equality. She has been recognized nationally for fighting to make sure transgender students have the same rights as their classmates. In January 2014, Maine's Supreme Court ruled that Nicole's rights had been violated under the state's Human Rights Act, making a historic and landmark victory for transgender rights in the U.S. It was the first time in a state's highest court ruled that it is unlawful to deny transgender students access to the bathroom of the gender which they identify. Wayne has been a safety professional and nationally known emergency management expert for over 20 years. Now he has turned his attention to introduce the world to transgender children and transgender rights, and to provide a safe environment for transgender children to grow, to learn, to be safe, and to become productive members of our society. For her hard work and commitment, Nicole was named one of Glamour magazine's Women of the Year and was chosen to represent the state of Maine in the series Hometown Heroes, titled 50 Phenomenal Women of the Year Who Are Making a Difference. She also was named one of the 14 most fearless teens of 2014 for standing up against injustice. AACRAO, put your hands together and welcome to the stage our guests today, Nicole and Wayne Maines. Okay, I want to start off with a quote that I read in the Portland, Maine Herald Press, Nicole. The article ended with you saying, "I think it's nice to finally be able to have a voice. When everyone is talking about you and talking around you, it's hard when you feel like you don't have a say in your own life. I'm relieved to be able to advocate for myself. You know yourself the best. We are so honored to have you here today with us here at AACRAO and to hear your voice and to have your phenomenal dad here to share your family story and his experience and wisdom with us. I have a few questions for you and your father, but before jumping in, let's roll a video to foreground our discussion today."
Sounds good.
This is a minute report. A roll call is in order. Chair recognizes the representative from Orono, Representative Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to oppose the pending motion and to speak briefly. The proposition in this bill related to unlawful public accommodations and legitimate privacy concerns is not about bathrooms nor locker rooms to me. It is not about pulling threads in an unraveling of the Human Rights Act, and it is not an abstract concept about transgendered people or transgendered person. But it is for me about Cam and for Nicole and others like them. And then there's Nicole. Nicole grew up in Orono. She has a twin brother. Her case is well known to the Human Rights Commission in Maine, and her story was told eloquently by her father in front of the Judiciary Committee at the hearing on this bill. I've had the privilege of getting to know Nicole and her family for years, as they worked in the community of Orono to educate the community and to make sure that when their daughter went to school every day, she could do so like any other kid. Nicole and her family have had to leave Orono, and they now live in a different part of the state where Nicole goes to school every day like any other kid, absolutely afraid that someone might find out that she's transgendered. Because Nicole is stealth. That's the term that this kid had to learn in order to go to school every day to feel normal. And sitting with Nicole just a few weeks ago here at the State House, you might have seen her in the hallway and you wouldn't have known that Nicole is stealth or that she is a transgendered person. I've been lucky to get to know the story of Nicole and her family and learn about how open Nicole is to talking to you or anyone else about her experience, and about how this type of backward step with the Maine Human Rights Act puts in jeopardy her ability to go to school every day and learn, her ability to go to the mall and shop like any other kid, her ability to go with her parents to a show or to the movies and simply use the bathroom. This bill is unnecessary, and I believe will cause more problems than we even know now. I've also been a member of the LGBT Allies Council at the University of Maine for the past 6 years. Through this experience, I've had the awesome privilege of getting to understand and be a part of a team of people that works to make sure that any person, regardless of sexual orientation, can show up at the University of Maine and focus on what's really important, which is going to school, which is research, which is growing up and having the college experiences just like anybody else. It's because of that experience about a community being a tolerant community, being a community that is welcoming and safe for everyone, that I cannot support this bill. We do not need a consensus approach to human rights. And at the end of the day, passing this bill in any form, whether in its original form, the committee amended form, or any other form, would be a step backwards for Maine and would put an obstacle in front of many people across the state of Maine who are simply trying to go to work, go to school, and participate like everyone else in our communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Wow. Wow. In 2015, you shared your family's transformational experience in the publication Becoming Nicole. The book calls attention to some of the challenges Nicole faced growing up transgender, with the added complexities of being one half of a set of identical twins. Nicole, talk to us about the day-to-day joys and challenges of knowing who you are and were becoming at a very young age.
Well, you know, I think the joys of knowing who you are when you're very young is the same as I think anyone else. And oh my gosh, there are a lot of you.
You didn't look out there, did
no,
you?
I didn't. I was just looking at you, and then I was looking at the screen, so I turned and I was like, whoa. Well, I mean, I think it's the same as anyone in this, you know, room understands. I mean, I think we all understood sort of what gender we identified with at probably like 3-4 years old, because it's the first thing you learn, right? And I think that was sort of the same thing. If you know sort of what you identify with, you know what you don't identify with. And it was sort of the same for me and my brother. He was probably like 3 or 4, and he was starting to recognize, you know, he liked playing with trucks or action figures or what have you. And I was realizing I didn't like to play with any of those things, and I didn't associate my stuff or myself with traditionally boys' things. And I was more drawn to makeup and playing dress up and Barbies. And I mean, that was really exciting for me, just to be able to, I mean, it's exciting for any of us to sort of be able to finally sort of form our own identities and carve out who we want ourselves to be. And I mean, that's liberating for all of us. But it's really hard and really confusing when you are trying to enjoy those freedoms and enjoy those liberties and really start mapping out who you want yourself to be at a very young age, but having everyone around you saying that that's wrong, or don't do that, you don't know yourself as well as you think you do. And that's the argument that I think a lot of people have against transgender people and transgender children especially, because they say, you know, you're too young to possibly understand the complexities of gender and sex, and it's actually really quite simple. It's, I mean, the first thing you really are taught and understand at a young age. When you're born, you're wrapped in a blue blanket or a pink blanket. Even before you're born, I don't know if anyone's seen on social media those like big gender reveal parties with like the balloons and the glitter, and they look expensive. Yeah. The first thing that's really determined about who you are is your gender, and that's kind of decided for you before you're even born. And so when that turns out not to be what you identify with, and you're trying to assert that you do know yourself, because that is the first thing you really understand about yourself. You know, you start, before you can even really speak, you have a sense of self. It's instinctual, and when you're told that's not good enough, that is confusing. And especially being an identical twin, this was all happening at the same time it was happening for my brother. And, you know, his identity wasn't questioned. He was old enough to understand the complexities of sex and gender, but I, for some reason, wasn't. And that was really confusing, and that was really painful. When I remember my parents and I it was like a battle for them to try to kind of push a male identity onto me. The holidays and birthdays and everything sort of became a tactical battleground, if you would. Because I remember specifically one Christmas season, I was very, very specific. I was like, I want an Ariel doll, because I was super into The Little Mermaid. And I was super specific with my parents. And come Christmas morning, I have an Ariel doll, but it was like an action figure from like a boy's toy line or whatever, whose name happened to be Ariel. And I was like, well, ain't that some shit? They pulled a fast one on me. You remember?
Yeah,
You remember that, Wayne?
I do.
Yeah. I was not happy, but I mean, it was those sort of things. And, you know, we can laugh about them now, but at the moment they really hurt, because your possessions and what you associate yourself with is is your identity. And people are trying to, it hurts when people say that your identity isn't good enough. I think is basically what I'm trying to say.
So Wayne, the giver of the Ariel doll.
How could you?
Right, really. I just got to take a moment.
It was strategic.
No, Wayne, seriously though,
Yeah.
you know, you and your family's advocacy for Nicole is really heartwarming. And I think that AACRAO members out here and our staff are inspired by your activism. And believe me when I say that we have experience with the relentless actions of a parent on behalf of their child's rights, right? To be seen, heard, and valued for who they are and they strive to be. So can you share with us today some common misperceptions and perhaps challenges? And it's been your experience, and so I'm just reaching for words, but I know that you know exactly what I'm talking about, that have faced you as a parent, particularly in relation to, you know, the U.S. educational system at the various levels for Nicole as she went through, you know, elementary, secondary, and now as a wonderful college student, sophomore at the University of Maine.
Well, unfortunately, what happens for these children is they get, just like Nicole was describing, they get challenged at home, and they learn very, very quickly that people are uncomfortable being around them, and not their friends. You know, Nicole's friends from age 4 to today, their generation gets it. They don't have any problem. I had struggled with so many things. Always loved my babies, but I didn't get it either, and I was I was uncomfortable with my own child, and I think back to how I might have harmed her, and I always apologize, but it wasn't because I didn't love her. I just was so afraid of things I didn't understand, and that's what happens in elementary school and middle school. Not teachers and administrators, they're afraid of gender non-conforming children, not necessarily afraid in the same way that I was as a parent, which is even harder, but oh my God, what's this going to mean for my school, and how do we develop a curriculum, and what are our policies in place to protect every child? Oh my goodness, what if some other parents complain? And that's what happened to us. Nicole started a transition beautifully in this first and second grade, and then some other students moved to our school district, and we were targeted by some conservative groups. That she was 9 years old when they showed up with attorneys and cameras, and our family's lives were changed forever. Amazingly damaging things happened to my family because of a few people with strong voices weren't ready to accept things that are just a little bit different. And they're not really that. Did you notice in the video, though, she's always been a little edgy? You know, transgender children from age 3 on and in college are the most brave people and courageous people I've ever met. And they really are. So they show up on your doorstep at elementary and middle school and high school, and there's a big, as you know, college students are in an age of discovery when they show up on your campus, and they might not have even told their parents. I just talked to a beautiful woman, one of your members just told me her story, and it's scary when your kid comes out, no matter what it is at 21, and they want you to change your mind right away. Like, what? Well, I knew you as Johnny for 21 years, and now you're Janie. You got to let me wrap my head around that a little bit, you know. I didn't do very well wrapping my head around it in the early days. I was very conservative. I'm an ex-nationally known NRA shooting sports veteran of the United States Air Force, and my kids telling me I'm really a girl. And then what I learned from her and her generation is, okay, well, that's cool. Go do your homework. That's where we got to be. You know? It wasn't all that easy, I'll tell you. But you can present and develop climates for these children. Your job is to make them be as successful and make it through college. We shouldn't be setting up roadblocks for that. And I'm telling you, I meant it when I said they're the most courageous people. You have amazingly courageous students from all walks of life that are successfully stepping up on your campuses, but transgender kids don't even get the opportunity in a lot of campuses. And we have to fix that. And it starts with introducing yourself. Hi, my name is Wayne Maines. My preferred pronouns are he, him, and his. And if your administration can say that and your college president can say that at commencement, there are kids in your audience and faculty on your staff that are going to be as prouder than they've ever been. It's not just the words, it's the action. You know, we need to back up our diversity and inclusion statements with action.
Thank you, Wayne. So
Yeah.
I have a couple more questions, but before I do that, I want to give Wayne and Nicole an opportunity to know who we are, so that they can basically know who they're talking to, and also in my next questions, place some challenges on us. So if the membership would indulge me for a few minutes, and I know we have lights in our eyes, but if we can try to get through them, can you stand up if you're from a public university?
Oh, that's nice.
Okay, take a seat. Can you stand up if you're from a private university? remain standing if you're from a private university with a religious affiliation. Okay, take a seat. Not to pick on folks, but can you stand up if you represent AACRAO, 14 states in our southern region? Can those of you who are not from Texas take a seat? Take a seat. Can you stand up if you represent an institution from the state of Maine?
Yay.
And this is not to pick on you, but can you stand up for us if you are from the great state of North Carolina? Thank you. And then lastly, can you stand up if you know, friends with, family of, or just have heard personally from someone who is a trans or non-gender conforming individual?
Awesome.
Thank you. I've asked you to do that because as we get ready to get into our next series of questions, it's really about trying to figure out here today what Wayne and Nicole can offer us as some specifics, maybe from some experiences that you've had, Nicole, at a campus or throughout your school years with someone that could have made a difference for how you felt or made you feel better or maybe not so much so. I think this is important for us, AACRAO, as we embrace. Wayne and Nicole both have been apprised of our diversity and inclusion competency that we have here in the membership. And Wayne and I were having a brief conversation about this, and he was sharing with me that a lot of places, a lot of universities and perhaps organizations have diversity statements. The question is, are you living it? So Nicole, can you share with us what are some ways that we might better advocate for and serve trans and gender nonconforming students on our respective campuses?
All right. Well, I think an important place to sort of start with that answering that question is talking about places and schools that I've been to that have done that really, really well. When I first started transitioning, I happened to be at a young age, but a lot of people start transitioning at a college age because, you know, that's sort of the first time that they're out of the house and they have the liberation to do so. But in my instance, I started transitioning when I was very, very young, and that was at the Orono School District. And we had been working with the school, and we decided that we wanted to make that transition gradual and spread that out over the course of 5 years. What I personally really liked about that was everyone was cooperating and communicating, and if we had questions, we could all address that together. And if other parents or other students had questions, we could address that with them as well. And it really didn't put any strain on any of the other students because they were all eased into this transition with me. And I think the really important thing to note there was the communication. None of us knew what we were doing. This was, what year was this? This was probably like 2004. And there really wasn't nearly as much information about transgender issues and transgender children as there are now. And so we had a lot of, we sort of had to pave our way and bushwhack through a lot of stuff to get to a place where we all felt really comfortable. And you know, we were able to do that by just having frequent conversations. We were able to do that by, you know, addressing what do we want to do if this circumstance happens? Okay, well, what do we want to do with this? And it was really that sort of take each situation as it pops up sort of thing and plan the best we could. Of course, I wasn't really involved in a lot of conversations, mostly because I was 6. But, you know.
I'm thinking that you probably were involved a little bit.
Yeah, I was a little bit, but yeah. Yeah, and really the problem started to arise when this group confronted the school. And the group said, you know, Nicole is somehow infringing on our rights. The backstory of that, of course, is by the time I was in 5th grade, I had fully transitioned. I was using the multi-stall girls' bathroom. I was wearing all girls' clothes. I had changed my name to Nicole, and all the other students didn't have a problem with that. They had all, these were the students who had slept over at my house all the time. We all hung out all the time, and everything was fine. But one student had moved about halfway through the transition, and he wasn't there for that sort of gradual, easing in process. And that wasn't really something that we'd accounted for. And his grandfather was a part of this special interest group. And like I said, they didn't really think that what was going on with my using the girls' bathroom was all right. And so they threatened the school with a lawsuit. And at the same time they were doing that, they had this grandson bully and harass me and follow me into the girls' bathroom to make a political statement in 5th grade. So I was in the girls' bathroom, and he was significantly bigger than I was, and this boy walks into the girls' bathroom and looks at me and says, "My grandpappy says that we don't have to have any faggots in our school." I was 9, and I had never heard the word faggot before, and I had absolutely no idea what that meant. And of course, that was sort of the beginning of all our hard work with the school starting to come undone, because as that was all happening, the group had been threatening the school, and they buckled because they didn't want to get sued. And so they stopped working with us, and they sort of figured, if the problem was that Nicole is using the girls' bathroom, well, then we can solve the whole thing by taking her out of the girls' bathroom, and effectively isolated me from the rest of my friends. And so they had me start using this teacher staff bathroom, and they kind of tried to glitz it up by saying, "Oh, it's private, it's just for you, you'll be like a VIP, it has they'll have your own mirror in it." And I was like, they kind of tried to play up to my vanity. And but of course, it was a staff bathroom, so the mirror was 6 feet in the air, and I was this big.
Right.
They tricked me again. But it sent a message to the rest of the other students that said, this student's different from you. And this student's different from you to the degree that this student needs to be separated from you because it's not safe or right or whatever for Nicole to be around the rest of the students and exist in the same spaces as you. And so the school stopped cooperating with us, and they stopped communicating. And after they really stopped communicating, there was nothing we could do, because there wasn't any room for negotiations. There wasn't any room to reason. There wasn't any room to say, why is Nicole being punished for something she didn't do? And so when we eventually had to leave, of course I'm skipping over a little bit here, which I'm sure we'll get back to, but just staying right on topic, we went to another middle school, and I had to go into hiding, which was mentioned in the video, and I had to be stealthed from all my new classmates. And then after 2 years of that, I finally was able to come out at a new private high school, and what they did that gave me the space to be able to come out was that they were communicating again. There was that open channel of dialogue, and that's really the highlight that I want to stress when it comes to working with transgender and gender nonconforming students, is there needs to be an open channel of dialogue between everybody involved, between the student and the parents and the faculty and staff and whoever else in the community, because this is something that's really important. And especially for transgender and gender nonconforming students that are coming out of the woodwork, I mean, you can just see in the past 10 years, the levels of visibility have skyrocketed. And I go to the University of Maine now, and what they've done so fantastically is asked me, what works for you? We have male and we have female bathrooms. We know it's kind of a broken and outdated system, but we can't overhaul a gender binary overnight, even though some of us would like to try, myself included. And they said, what works for you? Would you like, would you like a single room? Would you like to have a roommate? Would you like to have a bathroom in a single room? Or would you just like to use the same facilities as, all the other female students? And of course I said, just throw me anywhere and I'll make my way. But, I said, I want a normal college experience. I want a roommate. I want to be able, and I can't speak for every transgender person, but in my own personal experience, I wanted a roommate. And I wanted to just use the same bathroom as everybody else. Because that's really all I ever wanted, just use the bathroom. We're talking about bathrooms because, that's the easiest sort of battleground to have when it comes to civil rights and anything that's gendered. But the college asked, what works for you? And that's what's really important. Because everybody has a different experience. Nobody experiences gender the same way, and nobody identifies the same way. So it's really, really hard to come up with like a concrete policy regarding such a wide group of people in any other way than just, we will treat students with the respect that they deserve and the respect that their identities deserve. And we will treat students as they identify, and we will provide students with accommodations that align with their gender identity and really what works for them. And I think that's the most, that's really the most concrete way, just having that open line of communication and really asking what works for you.
So Wayne, I want to switch to you for a second, and we're going to dovetail a little bit off of, Nicole was talking about, I'll, put me anywhere, right? Yeah. But it's very trying to accommodate the institution, trying to accommodate, the organization or whatever. And so, I like to, as a father, as we think about your 2014 case, what was the tipping point for you? I know we're hearing a lot about basically, these battles around bathrooms and things, but we have an opportunity here to really, to embody this issue, right? We have someone here on our stage amongst us that, that we can really say that we're trying to figure out, where we're at, right? And what was that tipping point for you as a father that said, we could be accommodating, but enough is enough, and I need to fight for my daughter. So can you talk to me about that tipping point for you and your family? Because that's the wonderful thing about your book, Becoming Nicole. It's Nicole's story, but it's a family story about that transformation.
Well, there's so many defining moments. One of the biggest for me, the first time I ever spoke out in public, was they had a bathroom bill in Maine in 2011, one of the first. And the bill was basically promulgated because of our family. And all the major groups were involved. And anybody's been following Maine politics, it's not quite a blue state anymore. But they were going to put my daughter in a men's room. And you see her. And I had met so many other amazing trans men and women, young men with full beards that were going to have to go into the ladies' room. How was that going to work? And I finally said, I can't deal with this anymore. I can't stay silent. I gotta. And I testified. I mean, I'm getting a little emotional here, but I was trained not to cry. Now I cry every minute. But I want to tell you another story that's every day is a defining moment. Everybody has an auxiliary services here, the people that build the residence halls and put in the new gender-neutral bathrooms where we try. And I want to do a shout-out to my friends here in North Carolina. What an awkward position we put you in. I'm so proud of your universities because you couldn't win in that situation. And we can't put people in those situations where they can't win. But anyway, I mean, I'm an executive director of safety, security, transportation, and parking for the University of Maine system. And
did you say parking?
Yes.
He made me work for the parking offices.
Nicole worked in parking services.
I had to count every single parking space on the UMaine campus. And if that's not cruel and unusual punishment, I don't know what is.
So anyway, you know, these are my colleagues, the executive director of auxiliaries. Nicole's freshman year, before she got there, calls me, and actually I ran into him in the hall, and he goes, his name's Dan, and Dan was so proud. He goes, Nicole's moving in the whatever hall, and we just put in a gender-neutral bathroom with a shower on the first floor. He was so proud of that. And before I put my foot in my mouth a lot, I said, what are you, freaking nuts? I said, we just won a court case after 5.5 years that says Nicole can use any damn bathroom she wants to use. Then I realized I broke the poor guy's heart, you know. So, and I said, Dan, we still need that bathroom. Because every kid doesn't have the confidence that Nicole has. And that bathroom is just as important for the kid that's uncomfortable with Nicole. They can go use that bathroom. There are kids that just want a better private bathroom. Right. I said, but most of all, for your protection and mine, don't ever tell Nicole that, because she's going to go up one side, you and the other, and say, I'm not walking down from the 4th floor to the 1st floor to use the bathroom. And
because I've done that before.
That's right. And his message and his heart was in the right place. And I can see that everybody in this room's heart's in the right place. But those are the questions you got to think a little harder about. Work on the bathrooms, but it shouldn't be about bathrooms. You got to really be able to go back home and say it's not about bathrooms. It's about showing up with your parents. And Nicole was interested in fine arts, and she goes, I think I want to go to school in Savannah. And my first thought was, what are you, crazy? You know, what a great school, but I'm not sending my daughter to Georgia. You know, I fought to protect this country, and there's states where my daughter can't go. How dare they? You know, she should be able to go to school in Georgia and North Carolina and Texas and Ohio and Maine, and maybe not Kobe. It's a little too expensive. I don't know if you're out there. Every kid in America should be able to go wherever they want. 7% of the colleges and universities in this country even have housing for transgender students, and it's with restrictions. I'm amazed at that statistic. And, you know, we got to fix that. So it's about having discussions. It's about having diversity and inclusion policies, and then going beyond the policy and say, what do we really need to do? Have the discussion with auxiliary services. Have the discussion with your healthcare center. Are they prepared to support transgender students who are on every spectrum? You know, what about all the databases? I mean, I'm a Main Street guy. I really don't like it a whole lot sometimes. Yeah, but all the databases, I know how complex it is, but gender markers are so critical for these kids, and to go into class and be called, excuse me, I hardly can even use this name. It's just foreign to me anymore, but if Nicole's name was still registered as Wyatt Benjamin, it's not a real, that would remind her every day that our university is not ready to accept you for totally who you are, or to go in to try to join a fraternity or a sorority, because that's an amazing part of a college education, that whole opportunity to be who you want to be. Can she join a sorority at your campus? Not every one of them. And there's so many of those questions that you could ask yourself. And every time we don't do that, not only for college kids, but I just talked to a mom, every time that they take their 6-year-old child to the doctors, the nurse reads off his original birth name, and it crushes this 6-year-old kid, crushes her mother and father. There's so much education that we need to do in every discipline on your campuses, and it doesn't have to be that hard. But the first thing we have to do, I'm so proud that you all stood up and say you know somebody that's transgender and gender nonconforming. But do your friends know somebody? And we got a lot of work to do. So.
Indeed. So we're going to do something that sometimes we don't do, and that is to open up to the floor sooner than 5 minutes before we're about to end. So I've had a wonderful opportunity to sit here and ask some questions that I have of Nicole and Wayne, and I want to give the AACRAO members an opportunity to come to the mic, and for a little encouragement, the first two people that hit those mics, Nicole has a book for you that she'll sign.
First three people, actually.
Well, actually, well, we're going to save that last one for something special. But first two, don't hurt your colleagues though. On your way there,
It's a place of love.
because we do have some that are for sale, right? But can you do us the favor of this, please? Please, as we usually do, your name, what institution you're from, and because of the Wayne really trying to encourage us in our different offices to be a part of the solution, can you let them know what your role is, but more importantly, what part of the university you represent, because sometimes our titles don't necessarily reflect that.
Sure.
So let's start over here.
All right. My title does reflect it. So my name's Debbie Cheslock. I'm the assistant to the Vice Chancellor of Enrollment Management at the University of Wisconsin-Superior. And my question for Nicole is, who is the one person at college who's been your go-to person?
Who has been my go-to person at college? Well, honestly, I go to the University of Maine, which is where my dad works. So honestly, him.
Okay, besides your dad.
Besides my dad. The Office of Student Services has been really, really incredible. Of course, you know, since my dad works there, I know the dean, I know the president, and I'm able to go to all of them for help. I actually just had an issue with another student who was, you know, without going into the nitty-gritty, was really, really weird. But the Office of Student Services was really helpful, and they were really educated and up to date on information, and they were really able to handle my particular situation with grace, and of course my dad's also in charge of the police, so I have UMPD on my side. A couple times I've gotten wake-up calls from them, which was scary. But you know, I have a lot of people I can go to on the university, honestly. But I think most importantly, it's just making sure that anybody on the university can be anybody's go-to, and just making sure that everybody who's on campus is up to date and educated. Because at the end of the day, it's really not fair for transgender and gender nonconforming students to wait for staff and faculty to sort of, you know, catch up and get on board. We should already be there. But yeah, I think student services has been really, really helpful. Thank you.
Over here.
Hi, my name is Marina Eisenberg. I'm the registrar at a public charter school in Washington, D.C. for immigrant adults. I'm happy to say we actually have a really large transgender population, predominantly from El Salvador, because we have a community center in D.C. for them. However, because our students are all coming from other countries and they're here to learn English, it's kind of difficult to have conversations about lots of topics, but predominantly this topic, because in their native language there is no word for transgender, or there is no concept of pronoun. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, I know this might not be the case in Maine, but if you have any advice for us as we're helping people acculturate to the United States, acculturate to DC, and acculturate to having a large Spanish-speaking transgender population. How do we kind of help people coming from other countries where they've not only never been exposed to it, but they don't even have a way to talk about it?
I'll take a shot at that. The first thing, how many people are familiar with Seeds of Peace? It's a program that started in Maine years and years ago, where they brought kids from Palestine and Israel together, and it's continued to grow over the years. And we just spoke there, and there's a large influx of Somali, some folks from Burundi and different countries in Maine, that the whole concept of LGBTQ is a little bit foreign to them. And we have this Seeds of Peace conference where the younger kids come because they more than often can speak English and their parents may not yet. And it is so rewarding to watch these kids grow. And we'll let them have the open discussions. But to start those discussions, we had to have some older adults that I could barely speak English, let alone another language. And to have we invited some ministers from local churches and different areas to help become our voice. And the Latin American community, there's probably opportunities to do the same, to open that door. And there are also there's a movie that Nicole was just in called The Trans List. And what's her name from California, Latin American trans woman, she started a number of groups to help.
Bambi.
Pardon me?
Bambi?
Bambi. Yeah, Bambi, my friend Bambi. And to really help the Latin American community in California and in the West Coast. But if you reach out to me afterwards, I can give you some names. And it gets really hard with different cultures. If we can't figure it out, it's even more challenging. And it's very dangerous for those, especially young trans women of color. I'm a guy that has had privilege, and I really am still struggling and guilty with my white male privilege of, I thought I was a fair, there's still privilege I have that I don't even understand. And, but that's a place to start. That's a very good question. So.
Let's go over here to this mic.
Good afternoon. My name is Toby Frierson, and I serve as the Director of Admission in Savannah, Georgia, at a school called Armstrong State University. Nicole, it's great to hear from you and your dad today. For us, in admissions, in terms of students applying, of course, it's all about bringing in legal documentation in terms of, your name, your address. Of course, we collect social security numbers. That's definitely increasingly difficult because, as you all stated earlier, a lot of students are transitioning at the point of maybe leaving high school and going into college. And so any ideas? Our systems, our student information systems are binary. That's all we have is male, female. So any ideas as to what we can do in the interim to serve you all much better than we are now? And what was your own application process like to college? I'm assuming you'd already been through and everything said that you are a female. Is that the case?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that, with legal documents, it's really, really hard. But I think a really good way to sort of, if there's any way to sort of work with the system that you're using or your applications, if you could even just so much as include, legal gender marker as well as gender identity, so that whether or not, the system itself is including is binary or not, the student has the option to say, whether or not the gender identity does or doesn't align with, whatever is legally written.
I would add to that is, again, it's a great resource to put in student affairs or the registrar's office, but every state and how you change your gender markers is different. Yeah. So if you reach out to the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, or an equality organization in your state, and say to that student, we don't have all of our ducks in a row, but we have this resource can help you move forward and change your gender markers, because you need legal counsel, and they need free legal counsel. And there are those resources in almost every state. But as you collect that and you develop a packet of information that you can hand them and say, here are your resources, we'll help you every step of the way, and this is how you get a passport. That was the first step for Nicole, was getting a passport that said that she was female. And it was very, very concerning and emotional for us, because we weren't sure it was going to work. Her actual birth certificate, she's from New York, it still has her original gender markers. We have yet to be able to change that. But once you get your driver's license and your passport, and then you can start to, every state's a little bit different. So if you look in your state and reach out to one of those organizations and develop a resource for those students, they have a better opportunity. They see hope. They see hope at the end of the light at the end of that tunnel that says, I can change my gender marker in Savannah, Georgia, you know? Some states are a little harder than others.
And I just want to reiterate also, like, even if you can't change the application itself, maybe even just including something at the end, if you can, just saying, is there something you would prefer us to use on attendance sheets or otherwise that might not otherwise be stated on legal documents? Would just really mean a lot to a lot of students, being able to give their own identities that aren't sort of typically offered.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good question.
Let's take this mic over here.
Hi, my name is Paul O'Brien. I'm from the University of Colorado at Boulder, and I work in the IT office, actually, as a program manager for student applications. I know we're all higher ed people here, but I have a K through 12 question that I hope will be illuminating still. My connection to this is that I have a kid who would like to opt out of the gender binary. He was assigned male at birth. He still uses he and his. He still uses his birth name, but he doesn't want to be in a box. And the place where this has really come up for us is on school-sponsored field trips that are sleepovers. You know, if it's a multi-night thing, he would want to stay one night with the girls and one night with the boys. What we've ended up with is he's in a room by himself with his mom, and that's not, it's great that the school wants to work with us on it, but it's not sustainable, I don't think, over the long term. And at the same time, all of us are sensitive to the other families who are involved, all these kids that are becoming adolescents. It's it's a weird, uncomfortable thing for all of us to navigate, even as full of goodwill as both our family and the school is. I just wondered if, in your process and journey through all of this, if you had found any kind of principle or any kind of approach to illuminate situations like this, because we're kind of baffled.
Yeah. Well, actually, we were in a really, really similar situation when I was in 6th grade. I was part of something called the Outing Club, which was at the end of the year, we would end up going on this whitewater rafting trip, which was an overnight camping trip. And of course, the school had said Nicole needs to use her own tent, and Nicole can't sleep in a tent with the girls. Which, of course, in our situation was ridiculous, because these were the same girls who were my friends, and they'd slept over, and we'd all, slept over at each other's houses a bunch of times, so it was ridiculous and unfounded. But I think in your case, I think it is really important that you guys are being sensitive to, the other families and the other parents. But I think if your child has, friends in both the male and the female tents, and that's something really to be discussing with the students, because all while what was going on when I was in 5th and 6th grade, the faculty and the staff had been working with the parents and hadn't really been asking, the students, what are you guys all comfortable with? Because if they'd really asked any of us, and they would have asked any of my girlfriends who were, the ones who were potentially in danger of my, supposed predation, we all would have been happy to tell them that it was such a non-issue. And so I think it's really something that, turn to the students, turn to the people who would actually be sleeping in the tents. What are their feelings? And then you can all sort of like address that and go from there and have those conversations and open channels of discussion. And just really, asking you guys, are there any issues? If there are, what are you afraid of? And you guys can really just address those and, debunk any fears and uncomfortable feelings that people may have. And those issues may just be things that are unfounded and things people just don't understand. And, after having a conversation, people might just be like, oh, awesome, no problem, super, use whatever tent.
And
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
I would just add that the compromise is exactly that, another tent, that anybody's welcome tent, and do some of that. And it really did work. When she was in high school, we also ran into those things, but the kids, they were allowed to do whatever they want to do. And there's one other little thing that comes into play we need more education in the elementary schools and in middle school and in high school. And if we start there, it's going to make your jobs even easier by the time they make it. But why is everybody so afraid to talk about gender in middle school? In elementary school, everybody's pretty much genderless. You could put a dress or a pants on anybody, and the kids don't care. But we really need to, as every college and university in here that has an education program and are training teachers and school administrators needs to build into their curriculum this discussion. And then we need to build a new curriculum for the next 25 years. And if we can do that, a lot of these questions will go away.
So we're almost at time, but out of respect for the two individuals that stood up, I'm going to call you in the order you came to the mic, and just make us mindful that we just have a few minutes, and we do want to do a proper close. So if you keep your questions succinct, and Nicole and Wayne, I hate to cut you off, but just to keep the time, because we know Nicole needs to be somewhere at 3:45. For those of you who have not looked at your program, she is on a panel in 200 A and B, which is going to be Student Voices, a student panel. So we want to make sure we get her out of here on time. So I'm going to take the mic here.
Okay, thank you. My name is Steve McKelvey. I'm the registrar at St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota, which is a college of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And it occurs to me that religious schools, and part of your poll was about religious schools, are in a position to either be particularly helpful or particularly damaging to people who are struggling with their sense of identity. And I'm wondering what your experience, or perhaps experience of people you know, has been with religious institutions and their support or lack of support for your journey.
Yeah, well, it's really hard because when I was growing up, of course, we faced a lot of issues from the religious right when I was in 5th and 6th grade. But of course, at the same time that all of that was happening, you know, we attended an incredibly accepting church. I went to 2 different churches while I was living in Orono, and they were both incredibly accepting of me and accepting of my family and our journey. And so I've had the privilege to sort of experience both kind of ends of religion, and I think a lot of my friends have not been as fortunate, and a lot of people are hesitant to reach out to people of religious faith because there's such a stigma surrounding it. And you know, it's really hard to come up with a concrete response to religion because everyone practices it differently, and everyone has, you know, different faiths and different views. But just in my personal journey, I've, you know, been taught to understand, you know, people experience things differently, and you can't judge one group of people based on, you know, an individual, and that's true of everybody.
I would just add that we get asked very often or told that God doesn't make mistakes. And I want to say absolutely. I'm not sure why our family was chosen for this journey, but we've had so many amazing people step up to help us, and I don't think we could have won our court case, and I know you people will understand this. If I didn't do what I do for a living, I don't think we would have made it to the state Supreme Court. So the God that I love chose us for a reason. And recently Nicole went back to that church in Orono, and she did a sermon. Like, how surreal is that for her, Dad, you know?
I thought I was going to start boiling.
So I would ask anybody from any church, if they want to talk, whatever denomination, faith, tell me what you're afraid of, and I'll help you get over it, because I had those same fears. And fear is a powerful tool. It can be used for good and bad. So thank you for that question and your school.
So let's get our last question right here.
Hi, my name is Jaren Neville. My pronouns are she and her. I am the assistant registrar at Carnegie Mellon University, and my question is for you, Wayne. Because of what you do and because of where you work, Nicole has had an amazing amount of support from the administration. But my question to you is, prior to her coming, how aware was the administration of her situation, and how accepting were they initially in terms of her coming and being able to provide the services? I think a lot of the other universities struggle is when we get students who come to our campus and we're trying to do the right thing, but we haven't had the same type of experience in trying to get our faculty and administrators and everybody and all the services on board is not an easy thing. So I'm just wondering, did you prepare them before, or how was it when they first found out?
Well, that's a very good question, and I'm going to answer this, and this is taped, right? So the university, they knew we were coming, and they weren't always comfortable with it, and they have praised themselves as being a LGBT-friendly university, but they weren't where they needed to be. And there was such a high-profile case, not only in New England, but nationally. It's still occasionally uncomfortable, but what I say to them is, to our presidents and our provost and whoever else that will listen, is you're getting paid to lead. It needs to step up to the plate no matter who your conservative donors are. And you guys know what I mean. Even in Maine, they have very deep pocket conservative donors, and I don't really care. And the students, they don't always know what's going on behind the scenes. And there have been times where my voice was a little bit too strong that might have influenced the wrong donor in a wrong way. I don't care, yeah. And the parents of kids coming to your schools don't care either. And but what we've done is learn together. And I have a direct line to our chancellor and our vice chancellors and the college presidents. I've guest lectured on every campus now, and all the way to Fort Kent, Maine, if anybody knows where that is. It's 66 miles from the border of Canada, and we have to continue to move forward whether our leadership's on board or not. And does any campus want to just be known as the LGBTQ campus? I don't want to do that either. We need to be the campuses that support everybody. Because, I'm on a mission to help Nicole and her friends, but I'm on just as big a mission to help the Iraqi student that I just met last week, who came up and gave me a big hug and wants to go trout fishing, So, and the two young ladies that I just met here at your conference from China. Our book comes out in China next week. That's how cool is that? So, yeah, they weren't ready, but who is? Our job's to help them be ready. So, and you're doing it. I'm so honored to be here, and I want to thank Monique and Janie and Melanie. They said, "You're going to let us talk to colleges from the South? Like, this is great." So we usually talk to New England, which is, so thank you so much.
Yeah, what an honor it has been for me today to share this stage with this wonderful man and this wonderful woman, father, daughter, activist. And I hope that what you'll take out of this room today is that this story today is a story of many students on our campuses. We often have an opportunity to engage with students when we're engaging with their parents. Often it is in the form of their advocacy for their students. Take with you that in your head as it relates to your jobs, but take it with you today in your heart, because this is a human story, this is a family story, and it could have been your family, and it may be one day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, that was fun.